I'm going to use that as a bit of a basis and work through that. He built his story around it, that there was angels and demons that were sort of warring in a dimension that we cannot see, and that's what he sort of built his whole thing around it. Now, unlike the book of Daniel, one thing that we have to remember, Frank Peretti in his book, and remember it's a fantasy book, he made implication that the prayers of the Christians is what strengthened the angels. Did anyone ever pick that up when you were reading through the book? That's not a truth. Daniel's prayers didn't strengthen the angel. It's not like the angel said, I can't do anything until the Christian prays. The Christian doesn't strengthen an angel. That's a fantasy as opposed to a truth. The angelic people already have their powers from God. The Christian is simply somebody who is commanded to pray and to work through that. There was a statement in the book that said this: flailing with swords against forces vastly superior in number, God's angels take their share of blows, a broken wing, a deep gash in the body, pain from countless injuries incurred during the moments of lull in the human's prayer lives. But with every prayer comes a new surge of strength, equipping the angels with the ability to stand against the strongest demons. Is that a true statement or a fantasy statement? It's a fantasy statement. Our prayers don't equip angels with a surge of strength. That's part of the fantasy of the novel that sort of builds the suspense and builds how he's done his creative writing in that speculative fiction novel. Now, here are a couple of cautions I want to give you as you would have read this book. I'll give you some cautions and I'll give you some positives as you look at pushing this New Age philosophy of a one world order and all these things that they're pushing through. One thing that we've got to be careful of after you've read a book like that is that you don't get a preoccupation with New Age, the old New Age philosophy and New Age conspiracies. I mean, the New Agers, for example, they wanted to take over Ashton's grocery store, the police department, the courthouse, the liberal church, and then they were in the process of taking over the Bible preaching church, the newspaper and the local college, and all of a sudden, if we're not careful, we'll start to think that is the sway of everything that's happening in the world around us. And you can have an over-preoccupation with the thought of New Age philosophy. And if we're not careful, you'll start to have a preoccupation where you will label everything in our culture a New Age philosophy, and that's simply not true. There is definitely New Age in our society, but don't go searching for New Age in every single thing that's around. And sometimes when you read a book like this, you think New Age was sweeping the entire town. That's what's sweeping Rockhampton. Well, that's not necessarily true. There'll be elements of New Age that would come through in any society, but don't take a preoccupation with that. And here's what else can happen. Sometimes you can think these New Ages, according to Frank Peretti's book, are so demonic and so bad that they're beyond redemption, and that is not true. There is New Age philosophy teachers within Rockhampton, they're within every city around Australia, people who teach the New Age philosophy of there is no God and we can have our own beliefs and a humanistic approach. And those people are not beyond redemption. Those people are people whom Jesus died for. And so don't ever take a premise of a book that puts this thought that everyone is influenced by some demonic being and think, oh, that must be true in society. That's not true in society. So that's a caution. Don't become an over-preoccupation with the New Age conspiracy whereby you think people are beyond the reach of God. The other caution is a caution on prayer. And this caution really is what I mentioned before, that the purpose of prayer is not to give angels strength. Okay, this is a caution for you. The purpose of prayer is not to do that. Toward the beginning of the book, Tal was one of the leader of the good angels, and he refuses to fight the demons, knowing that the, quote, prayer cover of the Christians was insufficient. It's around about page 148 to 149 of your book. And so he was saying, I cannot fight because the prayer cover is insufficient. Well, we have to always remember this, that prayer is the interpersonal communication between God and man. It's not our prayers that strengthen the angel and give him the strength. That was just a fictional aspect of it to sort of say the Christians had the power if they would pray with power. Now that was a good side of things of prayer, but that's not what the purpose of prayer was. The other point I want to mention to you, the other caution is this. I believe as you read the book, what the fantasy side of it gives too much power to the demons to influence people's thoughts and actions,
Yep.
to where people, if they're not careful, can start to think that's the truth, and we're looking for a demon behind every tree or every bush. There's something there, or we're blaming everything on a demon. I had a bad night's sleep last night. It was a demon's fault. Or maybe because you just had too much coke before you went to sleep. That might have been the real problem. Or I didn't, and next thing I can be looking for a demon out of everything because I just read Frank Peretti's book and it was full of demons. Just remember, it was a fantasy book, and he does place a lot of emphasis on that because that was his intent, to show a struggle between good and evil. And he does that. So as you work through those things, he pictures the Marshall Hogan, who is very despondent over being rejected by his daughter. And you know, as you read through the book, the false accusations that came against them, and some of the terrible things that were labelled against the pastor, labelled against Bernice, labelled against Marshall, and the accusations that came against them. But he said that he was despondent because he had the demon called complacency digging its taloned fingers into his leg to encourage his despondency. Well, that doesn't happen. That's fiction. That's a fiction. And if we're not careful, we'll project that into our life and think, oh, the reason this person is this, it's a demon, it's a demon, it's a demon. So you've got to be careful you don't over-demonize things, because that's the emphasis of the book and was the purpose of the book. But it's the fiction sort of thing. There's things there, but they cannot push you to a point of coercion. What they can do is influence thoughts and tempt you to encourage you along a path that will often be followed because of our natural sinful bent. If a person has a sinful bent or a temptation of that way, that's why the devil and principalities and powers entice us. And they entice us, and then we follow the bent that we have. So that's the principle of dealing with those there. So just remember, it's a fantasy book. The textbook on angels and demons is the Word of God. The textbook to understand the truth about angels and demons is the Word of God. The textbook to understand angels and demons is not a fantasy novel. So if you just keep that in your mind, enjoy the novel and the things that go back around and all the things that happen. It's quite an interesting sort of portrayal as it is. And remember the genre, it's speculative what?
Fiction.
Fiction. So just keep that in your mind, because some people can, all of a sudden, fiction becomes reality. I mean, that's why a lot of people love to embroil themselves into movies at times, because they forget that the movie is just a movie. And they embroil themselves into the movie, and it becomes the reality to them. My grandmother, who passed away about 5 years ago, in her 90s, she lived, you know the TV show Days of Our Lives? You probably don't know. She lived through this show. I didn't know that until she passed away, and we went through, and she had scrapbook after scrapbook after scrapbook. She had kept clippings out of newspapers on different sections of the show, and people get so embroiled in it, they think that it almost is a reality, and they forget these people are actors. They're getting paid to act this way. And so many times when we look at a movie, we can get embroiled and think it's real. Because that's the purpose of the movie, to make you feel that way. And so too when you read a book. But always remember, there is a difference between fiction and non-fiction. And the scriptures are obviously non-fiction, and you need to read them that way. Now, one other thing about the area as well, just talking about like demonic things. When he portrays in his book, The Present Darkness, the fantasy of female angels, baby angels, pipsqueak demons, different angels with wings, and portrayal of demonic spirits in charge of hell. Who's in charge of hell right now? Who is in charge of hell?
God.
Who? No.
It's God.
Yeah. God is. How do we know that God is in charge of hell now? Who has, if I have the keys to this building, and no one else has the keys to this building, who has the access and the control of this building? I do. Why do I have the access? So I have the keys. Who has the keys of death and hell now?
Jesus.
Jesus does. God does. Because once he died and resurrected, he took the keys of death and hell. He took that power from the devil. And he has the keys of death and hell. He is the person in charge of it. God is the creator of all things. Who created hell?
God did.
God did. He created it for the devil and his angels. So who's in charge of it? God is. The demons are not in charge of it. God is in charge of it. So again, see how it's a thought about, well, we know the devil and his angels are going to be thrust there, but it doesn't mean they're in charge of it. So that's where fantasy can take all of a sudden, oh, see, that's who's in charge of it. The devil's in charge of it. No. God sends people there. God is the one who has the keys of that. He's the person there as it works through. So Satan and his demons ruling in hell is, that's out of Dante's Inferno. It's just strictly fiction. He's not in control of it. God is in control of it from there.